welcome everyone. I'm glad you made it. I'm glad you're here. Let's get right into this. We're going to paint a beautiful tomato and an avocado. We're going to use juicy, moist paint. We're going to have a good time here. So I have just a regular office pencil or school pencil, and I'm going to use a Da Vinci Kolinsky round brush. This is a travel brush, which I like to use. These travel brushes are really nice. This is a number 5. So we're going to do a smaller composition here. The main thing I want to focus in on is really getting that fresh, juicy paint onto the paper. Let's make sure we're really not getting sidetracked on using like a watercolor palette that's got dry paint in it, and we're trying to scrub around on that, and we're not getting the results we want. So here, you'll notice on my channel, if you follow me on a regular basis, and if not, please subscribe. If you're here for the first time, hit that subscribe button. Just smack the subscribe button, hit the notification bell right next to it. This way you'll get my notification of when my new video comes out. I'm always making new videos every week, so once a week at least I'm making a new video, and I'm glad that you'll be watching it, and together we're going to learn a lot of great things about watercolor and get better at our paintings, and we'll be happier. If we're making and creating better paintings, we're going to be happier as watercolor artists, and that's always my goal. I'm always trying to get better, learn more, read more books, watch more YouTube videos, always on the hunt for more information. Information is really the key here. Information's power, so let's get right into it here. So we have our watercolor brush ready to go. We have our pencil, and we're just going to do, we'll do a tomato first. So let's start out, we'll do a nice tomato. We have the garden here at my house. I have a garden and grow tomatoes in the springtime and summertime. Now is harvest time. We're harvesting our tomatoes. So we're going to have the light coming from here. From this side, we'll make a little light spot there. And we'll make a little okay, so we have a little light spot there. The light's coming from here, so we'll make a little spot of light. Maybe just leave that white paper. And we have our tomato shadow. We're all set. So that's a simple tomato shape. Now, the thing I wanted to kind of really impress here is let's think about this real carefully. To make a really beautiful tomato, we're going to need rich, vibrant, exciting color. We don't want to have a situation where this happens, and let me find my palette that sits out and does not have fresh paint in it. Let me see if I can find that. Okay, so now this is my palette with dried paint where I haven't squeezed fresh paint into it. There's two ways. There's probably many ways, but there's basically 2 ways I know of that are really obvious of how to keep your palette with fresh, moist paints in it. And I always have fresh, squeezed, juicy paints in my palette all the time. Now this palette here has been sitting in my studio for maybe 3-4 weeks or even a month, and it's just out in the air, and all the paints are dry. So now if we look at this and say, how is this going to look if we use dried paints? So if we add some water to our brush and we put some, okay, we get some of that. That's, a very light wash, but we really can't get anything really dark and vibrant with that. Okay, let's try another color. Let's use alizarin crimson. Same thing. dried paints will only get you this kind of look if you don't have fresh, juicy paints in your palette. So this limits the look of your watercolor. If you're only using dried paints and you're not using fresh, juicy paints like my main palette that I use all the time. So you can see how that looks faded and kind of dull. And, you know, this type of wash is good when you're using, or when you're doing light washes, but usually when you're doing watercolors, you're always going to need darks too. This is very light. So we need darks in our paintings. Dark tonal values, because that's what's in real life. If we look at a real tomato, we're not going to see this kind of a red. If we look at a tomato that's just been, if we go into our garden and we grab a tomato and we look at it, we say, that doesn't look like the color of a tomato at all. It's too light. So how are we going to get that beautiful tomato? The color, the beautiful, exciting, vibrant color. We have to have fresh, juicy paints. So these dried palettes where there's no fresh, juicy paint, we're not going to get a good result with our paintings. So let's make sure we have fresh, juicy paint in there. If you have to squeeze it, so the two ways you can do it are: one, each time you go to paint, you squeeze in fresh paint with your tubes. Just a simple, quick. I keep 2 plastic bags with my paints. Cool colors, blues, purples, greens. That's my one bag of tube paint. Then I have my warm colors in the other Ziploc bag, and that's the, you know, yellows, reds, browns, umbers. So I keep my colors warm and cool in 2 different bags. And then, so if you want to, you can keep your paints organized, and then each time you go to paint, you can squeeze a little bit of paint in your palette on each of your colors you're going to use, and that'll work. You'll always have your fresh, juicy paint as you paint. But if you paint quite often, maybe once every day or once every couple days, that gets to be a little much, always opening up and closing your paint tubes. So that's why I suggest using maybe a piece of small paper towel that you moisten. You put in your palette, you close up your palette, you put it in a plastic bag, and then you set it in the refrigerator in a cool place or by a cool window in the wintertime. In the summertime, if it's really hot, maybe inside the refrigerator. That's what I do. So that's just a little tidbit of information of how I keep my palette and my paints moist. I also have another channel on YouTube called Watercolor in 5. If you go to Watercolor in 5 and you just tap in palette, you'll see I have like 3 or 4 palette videos, and that describes exactly how I keep my paints nice and moist. So if you just type in Watercolor in 5 and type in the word palette, you'll find some really cool videos on that. So I'm hoping you'll check that out. And that's a great resource for you to check out the way I set up my palettes, the colors I use. I also have the how to keep your palettes with your paints fresh and moist. So that's what you need for your paintings, to have that. And also, too, if you're just new here and you haven't ever subscribed, please consider subscribing on my channel here. Just hit the subscribe button down below, and this way you'll get my new videos every week. We're making videos every week here, the whole enchilada every week. We do landscapes, seascapes. We do tutorials like this with techniques, methods, process. Also, we do boats, flowers, figure painting. We do it all. So just to let you know, if you subscribe, you'll be getting interesting content every week, once a week at least, sometimes twice a week. All right, let's get right back into it here. So we're saying here we want to make sure we have fresh paint, moist paint in our palette. That's the first thing. And then the second thing we want to make sure is our brush. We're using a round brush here, a natural hair brush. You want to, let's make sure we're controlling how much water is in the hairs of the brush when we're painting, because that's a really critical thing. You'll notice if you really keep a very keen awareness of how much water is in your brush, in the actual hairs of your brush, your paintings are going to go much better. Trust me, they're going to go much better. And I'm going to explain how it is that happens right here, right now. All right, so If you want a nice, rich, vibrant color with your watercolors, let's say for this tomato, you're going to want to take your brush, rinse, get some water on there, and then you're going to do a thing we call checking the water off. You want to check some of that water off, you can do it in many ways. One, you can tap it on the side of your water container to take some of the water off, or you can go over to your small piece of sponge, tap on the sponge to take some of the water off the hairs of the brush, or you can tap on a small piece of paper towel we have here, so you can keep some paper towels by your palette. Tap off some water on there, rinse off your brush. You can also, if you want, you could check some water off on a small piece of tissue. You might hold a piece of tissue and tap on that to take a little bit of water off the brush. Or I always wear an apron most times when I paint. So if you have an apron on, you take your apron, you rinse your brush off, and then you tap it on your apron to take a little bit of water off. So it's always best to take a little water off your brush once you rinse it, because you're constantly going back and forth to your water container to rinse your brush off. So once you rinse your brush off, you either go to your sponge, your paper towel, your apron, or you have a paper tissue, a little bit, and that's it. Now you have a damp brush and not a brush that has water all flowing out of it, which is going to interfere with you getting some really good color on here. So let's go in. We'll get some. We'll get some cadmium red. We'll use some cadmium red here. See that rich, exciting color, right? Look at that. Perfect. Maybe we rinse off the brush, tap on the sponge, take off some of the water, not all of it, some of it, some alizarin crimson. And there we have a little bit of a darker red. Well, let's do it again. Rinse, check off some water on the paper towel. Maybe we'll go in and get some cobalt blue. Maybe a little bit of purple. Perfect. Rinse the brush off. Tap a little bit of water off on the tissue. And we'll go in, we'll get some yellow ochre for the shadow area. A little bit of shadow area, a little bit of yellow ochre. Rinse the brush off. Check a little water off on the sponge. Maybe a little bit of purple. Maybe we'll mix that out a little bit on the paper. There we go. A little shadow. Perfect. Now, rinse off the brush, check a little bit of water off, and now we're going to start. We're not going to go into the paints. We're just going to rinse the brush off, check some water off so that it's just the damp brush. And then we'll just start to, same thing, rinse the brush off, check the water off. And we're just going to get that lighter color over here. See how that's that lighter tonal value? Look at that. Then maybe we go with a little more purple. Rinse off the brush, check off the water, purple. A little bit of a shadow in there by the stem. Rinse off the brush, check lots of water off. Almost all of the water, take that off the brush. And we just smooth this over so we have a little bit of that highlight there on the tomato. Look at that, beautiful. So now we've done a gorgeous tomato. Look at the vibrant color on that. So that's exciting. We're going to come back. We're going to do a avocado. Before we do the avocado, though, let's just quick do a stem. Burnt umber, French ultramarine blue, burnt umber, French ultramarine blue. And let's just do a little stem. Now here, with the stem, a little bit of just, there we go. Perfect, look at that. Okay, so you saw how I controlled the water in my brush, making sure I've got plenty of fresh, juicy, moist paint for this tomato from our garden. We just picked our tomatoes today from the garden outside. It's harvest time. In New Jersey, beautiful. We have beautiful gardens here in New Jersey in the United States, and we're picking our tomatoes now. So you can see how we accomplished getting these fresh, moist, juicy colors onto the watercolor paper, and that's how your paintings are going to look. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll do an avocado. We'll go through the same process again so we really have it locked in how to get these really juicy, beautiful, exciting colors in our watercolor paintings, okay? All right, we'll come right back. Okay, so we just took a quick break. Take breaks when you paint. I always say concentration kind of like usually starts to fade around 15-20 minutes at that point. For me, that's about where I find my concentration starts to fade a little bit, 20 minutes, 25 minutes. So I think every 20 minutes, if you take a small break for 5 or 10 minutes and then you come back, you're going to do much better. You'll keep more focused on the your painting and what you want to accomplish and the goals and tasks that you have set up as you paint. So here our goal and our task was to make sure we're concentrating on how much paint and water is in the brush hairs of our brush. This is a round Kolinsky sable brush. It's a travel brush by Da Vinci, pure Kolinsky. And it also works the same for if you're using a synthetic hair brush or a mix of synthetic and natural hair. So if you're using a round brush, just remember that we want to control how much water is in the tip of that of your brush hairs. We don't want too much water in there so that the water is flowing out everywhere and kind of making too many puddles of water on our paper in our painting, or we don't want to have it so that our brush is completely dry and there's no water in there. We want to have some dampness and water in our brush hairs. So that's the kind of the basics of this video, is sort of getting that right, just the right amount of water and paint ratio in the brush as we're painting. And we did our first small composition here. We did a tomato, a nice beautiful New Jersey tomato. Tomatoes, we're actually picking them right now here in New Jersey. It's harvest time. We're picking the tomatoes, the cherry tomatoes and the beef eaters tomatoes and all those great, beautiful, tasty beautiful fruits, the tomatoes here, and we make pasta sauce with them and put them in salads and all that great stuff. So I'm sure many of you have gardens and you have a fun time gardening. Okay, so now we're going to do an avocado next here. So we'll do an avocado right here next to the tomato. And all right, we're going to change our water. Let's change our water often so that we have fresh, clean water. And again, we just said that we have numerous ways we can dry off our brush. We can use the edge of our brush, our water container. You can kind of flick the brush hairs on the water container to take some water off. You can also, when you rinse your brush, you can take some water, check some water off on a sponge, a small piece of sponge. You can do the same on a piece of paper towel. Also a tissue, if you want. If you can hold a tissue while you're painting and you tap some water off on that. I always wear an apron when I paint. This way I can check water off on that really quickly. So many ways to control the water in your brush hairs of your brush. All right, so we did that here. Now we'll just splash a little bit of water in there. We'll get some paper towels. We'll clean up our palette a little bit. We'll just take some of the paint that we've used before and just Keeping the palette clean is a great idea. This way you don't get too much muddiness in the paint colors. Sometimes you might want to have some nice muddy colors, so you can leave your paints and you don't have to worry about cleaning up your palette. But for this kind of painting here, we're getting really fresh, vibrant, high-intensity colors. We want to keep the palette clean. Okay, now we are going to draw in our... So we'll draw in a nice avocado here. And a shadow. So we'll draw our avocado and a shadow. Like that. Looks good. Okay, now, again, we're going to keep with that consistent idea of we're not going to be able to get a good color, high intensity color and a proper tonal value that we're seeing when we're painting our subject matter. This happens to be still life, some fruits and vegetables and things. We're not going to be able to get that really good color if we're just scrubbing around on dry paint here. You can see these are dry paints that I have. So we can't really get good color with that. But if we have our fresh, juicy paints, we're going to be able to get those gorgeous colors we want, right? We want gorgeous, high-intensity colors in our, in our paintings, and we want to make sure we're really accurately, when we're looking at our subject matter, whether it's, still life, landscapes, seascapes, cityscapes, whatever subject matter you're painting, you want to be able to capture that proper tonal value of what we're seeing. So if you need a really dark, it's hard to get a dark. If our paints are dry, like this, see, if I'm going into some palettes that are dry, that's not really... Now if I pick up some fresh, moist paint, see how dark that is? That's how we have to have that. All right, so now we'll get started here again. Same process. We rinse our brush off each time we go into the palette. We rinse the brush off, check a little water off on our sponge, our paper towel. Maybe we'll use a tissue, whatever you want to use. Out of all these, you can use, if you have an apron on, you can use your apron like this. Rinse the brush off, dry a little bit of water off on the apron. And then we go in and we get our color, green, yellow ochre, green, and we'll also use some cobalt blue. And that looks like that's going to be a really nice French ultramarine blue, a really good avocado color. All right, there we go. And you can see, beautiful, intense color. Right around there. Now, let's get a little bit of cadmium lemon, or just a cadmium yellow is fine. Maybe a little bit of cadmium lemon yellow too. And then I'll pick up a little bit of that green. And that's where we rinse the brush off, take off lots of water, go over to our lighter color, and we'll leave a little bit of white here. So we're going to leave a little bit of lights here. And then I just mix the color on there. Maybe a little bit of French ultramarine blue, straight right into the tube paint. Then let's go with some yellow ochre, cobalt blue, shadow color. Rinse off the brush. Maybe a little bit of purple. There we go. A little bit of splashing. And then we have an avocado, a nice shadow, and again we got that juicy, vibrant, high-intensity color by rinsing the brush, checking off quite a bit of water, and going straight in and getting our, you can see all that fresh paint on the tip of the brush there. And the same thing, we rinsed off the brush, checked off a lot of water on maybe the paper towel this time here. Then we go in and get some blue, straight French ultramarine blue. A little bit of darker darks there for the shadow color underneath. And there you have it. So this is a guaranteed way that you can get beautiful, vibrant, rich color into your watercolors. This just happens to be a tomato and an avocado. This could be landscape paintings. It could be trees, grasses, any kind of flowers. If you're doing a landscape or even like a seascape, you'd want to have some really beautiful, dark, rich, dark colors in the ocean, some blues and greens in the ocean colors, then some really light colors in the ocean, maybe some light blues. The thing is, controlling the lights and the darks in your painting is really critical, and that's all you have to do is just remember it's the controlling the water in your brush. If you want a really, really exciting, dark, straight, beautiful intensity color, you have to, the main thing is to get the water, rinse and get the water, and check that off on either a paper towel, a sponge, a tissue, an apron on your, if you're wearing an apron. Get that brush a little bit dry, then go in and grab that paint, pick up that paint, that fresh juicy paint like that. Just like that. You want to pick up lots of that goopy paint and get that onto the watercolor paper, and that's going to give you those real intense colors that you want, and you'll be excited. You'll have gorgeous paintings, and all it is just really, again, keeping an eye on that water, how much water's in your brush hairs. And so try this out, have fun with it, practice it, do a tomato, do an avocado. That's simple, right? A couple simple items like this. Then maybe try it out on your favorite subject matter that you have. You might like to do flowers. Try it out in your flower paintings. The same concept. Using your fresh, juicy paints, moist paints, freshly, tube paint, squeezed right out of the tube. And I have also another location on YouTube. It's called Watercolor in 5. Consider going there, Watercolor in 5. If you type in Watercolor in 5 in YouTube and then click, also type in palette, my palette or Chris Petri's palette, you'll find that I have about another 5 or 6 videos on this channel, Watercolor in 5. That's going to show you how I keep all my palette colors fresh and juicy and moist. I go into, how to store it. I put it in a plastic bag. I explain the whole method to how to keep your paints nice and juicy like this. So you don't have to keep squeezing fresh paint all the time when you're doing your watercolors, because that can be a real pain in the neck. I know myself when I first started and I learned that I had to keep my paints like this, fresh and moist. I said to myself, I can't be bothered every day if I want to paint, I got to take the tubes of paint out and squeeze all the tubes into my palette. Didn't make sense to me. So that's why I learned how to, again, use the methods that I have. If you go to Watercolor in 5, again, that's my second channel, Watercolor in 5. And if you type in palette Watercolor in 5, you'll find my other videos on palettes. And I also have palette videos too, also on this channel, on my main channel, Chris Petri, watercolors here on this YouTube channel. All right, so everybody, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Enjoy. I make videos every week, and we do all kinds of subject matter. Most times we're doing paintings. We're doing full paintings, the whole enchilada, seascapes, ocean, flowers. You know, we do cityscapes, buildings, we do people, we do figures, we do everything basically, but we do full paintings every week. This week I decided just to take a step back and cover the real exciting part of how to keep that brush with just the perfect amount of water in there, perfect amount of paint, so you can get all your tonal values, your lights, your darks, your rich colors, and you'll be happy. You'll be creating better paintings all the time. All right, we'll see you on the next video. Have a great evening, morning, afternoon, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye-bye.